In this series of videos, we're going to be actually diving into the nitty-gritty about which chart types, one, are available to us in Tableau, and which ones we should use for various purposes. Like, how would I distinguish whether I should use a bar chart or a scatter plot or an area chart or a line chart? These are not random decisions. In fact, we kind of need to motivate this problem a little bit more to kind of understand why. There are four big chart purposes, families, flavors, and they are the following: comparison, distribution, relationship, and composition. Which one of these we fall into is not some kind of random choice. And this is the most important thing. It's like you have to clearly articulate the goal of the visualization before you make it, and then that puts you into one of these four camps. Once you're in that camp, which one of them you end up doing is then driven by the data you have available, but also then perhaps by aesthetics. But that is the aesthetic, how you want it to look, is at the very, very, very end. And oftentimes, people get themselves into trouble by saying, I want to make a scatter plot, and they don't even know what the variables are that they want to show, right? Which it's setting yourself up for failure. So let's go through these very not in a lot of detail. We're going to talk about them in a ton of detail, but just kind of to distinguish them from one from the other. In comparison, we're looking at multiple sets of values and we're comparing them to each other. You know, are these higher, are these lower on average, and kind of what do these things look like? This is slightly different than distribution, which is looking at the distribution of a particular variable across its range. So if I look within one column, for instance, how are the values of that variable distributed? So this is different than comparing two variables or the same variable across different time periods or something like this. The next one is relationship. So if I take two, for instance, numeric variables, is there a perhaps linear relationship between these two? Is there an exponential relationship between these two? Is it something more complicated? But the relationship by necessity needs multiple variables in there because you're looking at the relationship of one to the other. And then composition. How are the values, let's say the observations of a particular variable, broken down across categories? So if we're looking, by region, by city, by state, and maybe at all these different levels at once, how are these values kind of chunked up across these different places? So perhaps already your mental gears are starting to click a little bit. You're starting to think to yourself, well, that sounds like that would involve numeric variables, or that would involve categorical variables. And if that's kind of the direction that your mind is moving, you're definitely on the right track. This is exactly what we need to start thinking about. So what we're going to do in the next few videos in this series is go through each one of these families carefully, outline the options we have within each, and then for each one of those options, detail the requirements that we would need to fulfill in order to make that visualization. So for instance, with this line chart, we need two numeric variables, and we can add a categorical variable if we so choose. For this pie chart, we need a total number of counts, and then we need to have that broken down by some kind of categorical variable, some type of dimension, and so on and so on and so on. So there's a lot more to come for each one of these things, but the big overarching goal is to figure out, given the business question we have, which one of these four families do we fall into, and then the next videos in this series will kind of show us within each family what should we do. So stay tuned.